Welcome to Pure Hustle Podcast. I'm Mike.
And this is Rolando, and we're here for another Monday mini-sode.
Yeah, we're bringing you a Monday mini, which is, when we take some really important information, something that might be like a segment of our long form, hour, 15-minute plus episodes, and bringing it to you just in 10 to 15 minutes. So here's something important. Here's maybe a top 5 or some important tips. And so today we're talking about the hidden costs of reselling, some of the ways where you might be losing money or not making as much money as you initially think when you're picking up or sourcing items. And we're going to help you identify these hidden costs so that you can be more profitable, have more money in your pocket at the end of the day, and be successful.
And we're specifically talking about sourcing, right? The hidden cost of sourcing. Because if you do not source right, you're not going to be profitable, right? You might be losing money. And the first thing is this whole idea of make sure to check sell-through. I remember when I first was reselling, and maybe I mentioned this in our other mini-sode about things I wish I learned, is that you look up a comp on eBay, right? Or on whatever platform you're using. You're like, oh, it sold before. But you don't check how many are listed. And so you're like, hey, if it sold before, it'll sell again. But the big difference is if you check something and it's only sold once, and then you go to the unsold, the ones that are listed, and there's like 30, 40, 50 of them, whew, you might be just losing money, right?
Yeah. And sometimes you end up in a position like we talk a lot on our podcast, like on Amazon, with like the all of a sudden a market gets flooded. So you can imagine if you've got this item, there's none of them listed. Somebody has the only listing. It sells for $60 because somebody really wants it. It's the only one. And a bunch of people start looking up and they're like, oh my goodness, this thing sold for $60. So now all of a sudden you've got hundreds of people sourcing this item, picking it up, putting it on, but there really isn't that demand for this item. It was just like one person needed it. None of them
at the
were
right
listed.
time. Yeah.
Right. And now all of a sudden a bunch of people have them listed, and now it's going to be a race to the bottom. Everyone's like, well, mine's been sitting for 3 months. I'm going to lower the price. And now you've got almost like a false, sense of this item sells for a whole bunch. But again, if that was the only one that sold, the sell-through isn't there. You potentially could be wasting money by picking up an item that really doesn't have the value you think it has, especially if you're going to end up with a race to the bottom with other people. And it's different. It's not the same as Amazon race to the bottom, but it could be in the sense of, hey, this type of mug sells for a whole bunch. Well, now if all of a sudden you've got hundreds of these mugs going up and there's not that demand for it, you're just going to be sitting and waiting. And that could cost you time to buy the item or money, and then time to just have it sitting there, listing it, and then space in your inventory. So check that sell-through rate.
Yeah, I'm serious. Like I'm about to pick up a local deal, and I checked the sell-through rate, and there were more sold than are listed.
That's a good sign.
That's a good sign. Yep. So always check out that. All right. Also, I know this is weird, but when it becomes a big item or something that a bulk thing, like you got to think, how much is it going to cost you to bring it home?
Mm-hmm.
Like, has that come up with you at all?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of, even with local deals, like sometimes I find a decent local deal, but then I think, okay, the amount of time it's going to cost me gas to get there and then to get home. If it's not on my way, I could be losing on that aspect. And then there have been some big items that I picked up. There have been things where I've needed to put a rack on the back of my car, or I've needed to, empty out the back of my car, put it down, or even do trailer. We've done trailer for certain items. And, if it's a big enough, I haven't done a big enough thing where I've had to like rent a vehicle to bring home. I haven't done like a big, warehouse clear out or something, but you could run into that. You could find an item that's like, hey, this is a really expensive item. But by the time you rent the vehicle, rent a trailer, get it onto the trailer, the gas there and back, like you could actually be not making as much money as you were hoping to make. Got to help a friend. I mean, there've been a few items, like big items for you that I've had to help move, and you've helped me move some big items. And if you're dealing with all of that, even if you're talking about a several $1,000 profit, it starts to eat away slowly. And before you know it, you're looking at several $100s. And was it worth all of that work?
Well, even I think about, 2 Q4s ago, there was an item that it was those, and I mentioned this before, but it was like those Smart Cycle, like Fisher Price bikes, right? And, at that time, like you could pay like 50 new. I mean, they're not available anymore. So it doesn't matter to me if I share it. And you could sell them for like $300 a pop. But when I was sourcing them, it was worth it for me to get a van because, man, if I sell like just 10 of them in a day, like it's like covering everything. It's going to cover my hotel. It's going to cover the van rental. It's going to cover everything. Right. And it's, bringing them back home, it was totally worth to go out and source. But then this last Q4, I had another big item, and this one I can't share because it's still out there. But you know, I picked up a lot of them, but man, the profit was, you know, let's say I spent 100, I could only sell it for like 200. And so I'm only making like $50 net on each piece. Unfortunately, I made the wrong call and it just wasn't worth it. Right. And so, you know, yeah, it was still profitable. Sure it was. But had I been able to play things over again, I don't know if I would have gotten, you know, that kind of vehicle, or would I have, you know, actually gone out there with that vehicle to source the item. Maybe I would have gotten a smaller vehicle. Right. And so it ended up costing me. But the same thing can happen, you know, when you do a bulk deal, right? Like you might buy a huge bulk deal, which requires you to get a truck and all this and the time spent, like Mike said, and you go back and you're like, I don't know if it was worth all that effort. Right. For example, I get one of our listeners, Wayne K-Way Shop. He had a huge collection of like Christmas, you know, Department 56 and Limax and all that. And he had to get a rental truck, but man, he was going to make all kinds of money. So it was totally worth, you know, picking that up and sourcing that item. All right. What about prepping?
Yeah. You're going to spend a lot of time, prepping certain items, and part of the prepping is going to be things like testing it, cleaning it, actually getting everything, you know, set up, getting those pictures taken. There's a lot involved in prepping to get an item ready to go. I think of a lot of, you know, VHS players that I have, right? Even the process of, for a while I had like a testing station set up, but it's not easily accessible for me anymore. So I have a separate TV because a lot of new TVs don't even have the connectors that you can plug in the old RCA, you know? Yeah. So I have to use different TV that I have for testing them. And then, this VHS player actually just ate my testing VHS tape. So I need to go buy another tape just so that I could test this. And then you come to find out like, well, one of the heads is dirty. So now I got to take it apart and clean it. And all right, all said and done. Oh, sweet. I made $30 on this item that I spent a bunch of time on. Right. So is it really worth it if there's that much involved? And so you got to be careful with what you're picking up. And is it something that involves too much time to really actually list? Even things like getting it into the room, getting it into a light box. Is it too heavy? Is it too big? So there's a lot of factors you got to consider. And so it's nice to see how much an item can get you. Hey, it's got a good sell-through rate. It's going to be, you know, this profitable item and it doesn't cost too much to get home. But if you're spending an hour to list an item as opposed to another item that you make half as much on, but it only takes you 10 minutes, there's a big difference there.
Well, I even thought about, you know, I used to pick up a lot of Sony camcorders, right? And they're profitable. Like you can pick up for $5, you can sell it for $150, but the amount of time I got to charge it, I got to test it, make sure everything's, you know, well on it. It takes me about 30 to 40 minutes. Where in that time, I could probably list 10 to 15 shirts that'll give me $300 to $400 profit. Right. So you got to manage it. Like you got to see, okay, is it worth it? Because there's that hidden cost of all that time lost that you could have been doing something else that you're not thinking about. Now, time spent to ship. So this is one of the reasons that I think Mike and I don't pick up certain items. I know for myself, whenever I sell a VCR right now for like, you know, $60, $70, I'm like, okay, this is going to take like 15, 20 minutes to pack. Right. And it's not like, you know, I'm in a bigger place. And so it's not hard for me to pack my, you know, the bubble wrap has plenty of space. You know, I have the boxes, everything's there. But man, I could have just sold a pair of boots that I just throw in a flat rate box in 1 minute where I'm spending 20, 30 minutes packing a VCR. Right. I mean, when's the last time you had to ship out something huge and you're like, why did I pick this up?
Well, I mean, it goes back to my last random story from the last episode. If you haven't listened to episode 284, sold a big Laserdisc player. It was over 20 pounds. And, you know, it wasn't too bad to take pictures of and to list, but shipping it was a nightmare because we had to find, I mean, we went through so many boxes to find one that would fit inside of. And then, all right, now we got to kind of float this thing. So now we got to find a bigger box and, well, we got to cut it down to the right size. And the amount of time we spent shipping it was like, all right, I charged the right amount for shipping, but I should have charged like $20 handling time because this took like 35, 40 minutes just for me to get this, you know, thing actually shipped. And it still arrived broken, you know, and it's like, you kidding me? You're telling me I could have literally just like wrapped it with some brown paper and sent it and it would have been the same result, you know, like, it's annoying.
So you got to think about that because, everybody gets wide-eyed and looks at resellers that sell a ton of electronics, which I have a lot of respect for. But you have to be willing to put in the work like they do, right? They're successful because they figured out their shipping. They got it down. They know what they're looking for. And it's worth their time. And most importantly, they're willing to list it.
Yeah, they're willing to list it. And there's been a lot of things. When you pick up an item that's too hard for you to get home, maybe you notice the sell-through isn't actually that good. You notice that you have to do a lot of research that could go into the prep too of I don't actually know what this is. And now you got to spend a bunch of time, which model is it, all of those things. Oh, it's going to take forever to ship. It's not going to be worth it. And then you put it on a shelf and it ends up in a death pile and it doesn't get listed for weeks, months, years. And it's sitting there. And the worst part is it's opportunity cost. You could say, oh yeah, eventually I could sell it and it's going to make me money. But you paid hard cash to pick up this item, to put up on a shelf and let it sit, or to put in a corner and let it sit.
It's the worst.
At the opportunity cost, if you think of the fact that could be cash you'd have to purchase other things that would be more easily, shipped and processed and listed and has a higher sell-through rate. Or even if you're well, I have a limited amount of sourcing I can do, so I can't just go out and guarantee that I'm going to buy other items that are going to sell easier. I mean, there's other things you can spend that money on, right? You can put that money into investments. You can put that money into other aspects of your business. You can put that money into even a nice dinner, one time of hey, I have this item that's sitting there in the corner for the last year. Maybe it would have been worth taking my kids out to a dinner one time, So the opportunity cost, what are you losing by that money literally just sitting there? So if you're not going to list it, and really the only way to do this is to do it long enough to recognize that is this item that I pick up something that I'm going to list. And if it's not, it's easy. I think a part of it is the adrenaline going when you're at a garage sale. And it's oh my gosh, I could pick this up for $5 and they sell for $60. And so you're already picking up all these things. You got all this. So you're acting in emotions. You pick it up, you buy it out of habit, and then you get home and you're not going to list it. So it's better if you can, in that moment of, oh, I can make some money. You know what? I'm not going to list this. Maybe there's another reseller who will.
I have 6 camcorders right now that I have not listed.
Don't pick up any more, man.
No, I haven't.
No.
Well, okay. But anyways, you know how it goes. Anyways, hopefully what we discussed today helps you understand the hidden costs of certain things, whether it be sell-through rate, the time spent, the time traveling, will you actually ever list it? So
opportunity cost.
Think about all these items so you're not losing money, but instead you're making money.
Yeah.
And with that being said, make sure you're real.
Be relevant.
And be reselling. Lates.
Peace.